My name is Robert Clayton Clay Gordon, September the 20th, 1951. I was born in Terrace Bay, but it was the old South Camp Medical Center, and I guess the new hospital was open in December of 1951, and I was born in September, so I guess I was the last of the old hospital, and never made it to the new one, but the new one's the old one now too, because we got the McCausland one in 1980. On my dad's side, my grandparents were born in Scotland, Edinburgh, Scotland, and they moved to Canada when my dad was about 6 years old, so the early 1920s. And on my mother's side, they were Dutch descent, and but her parents lived in Canada in the Belleville-Consacon area, and then her and her husband, my grandpa, they lived in Schreiber all their life. Yes, I worked for the railway for 33 years. I started out as a telegrapher in Manitowaj, and then I worked all down the line at Red Rock, Schreiber, Terrace Bay, Marathon, White River, Chapleau, Karcher, pretty well every place on the Schreiber division. And then I went train dispatching, and I dispatched for quite a number of years. We had, Schreiber division run from Current River to Karcher, Thunder Bay to Sudbury, 518 miles. And then I went chief dispatching, and then just before I retired in 1992, they centralized the dispatching office, and they joined the Sudbury and the Schreiber offices together, and that meant a move to Toronto. So I demoted myself, and I went down to the yard office down below, and that was good. I only had 8,000 feet of territory then between the east and west switch at Schreiber, as opposed to the 518 miles before, and but quite a loss in pay, about 24 grand reduction in pay. And I stayed there until as an operation coordinator, until I retired. I retired early. I was 51 years old. That's when Common Yards come in, and they moved the office to Thunder Bay, so it was a good time to go. When I was with the railway, I volunteered as a first aid instructor for the train dispatchers, and other various CP functions that they had throughout the 30 years I was there. And then I just after I retired, I volunteered with the seniors for the drag races, and at first I worked in the kitchen flipping burgers. And then lately, most recently, I've been on the garbage run, which I kind of quite enjoyed. Wow, there's really lots of them. One thing I always remembered as from a young child was the friendliness of the Schreiber people. You would go to the post office, and it'd take you about an hour to get home because everybody greeted you and asked you how you were doing and chatted. And the people were really, really nice. I also remember the spirit of the town when, I think it was 1964, when they put the artificial ice in, and everybody participated, old and young, and all ages, and you were pushing wheelbarrows of cement into the old arena. Not the one they have now, but the one where Western Tire is now, Western like Peter Speciali's place. And I always remember the spirit, like Schreiber, there always was a competition between Schreiber and Terrace Bay. And Terrace Bay always had the brand new uni jerseys, and Terrace Bay had everything, like the mill funded them, and they had the brand new rec center. They had the artificial ice, so they had a couple of months ahead of time to practice than Schreiber. But, Schreiber won the majority of games. And I do think it was because they had heart. Like Schreiber people, they had to work hard for everything they got. And it proved it, like they they always come out victorious. The other, well, I remember the Christmas tree in later times. I've always liked that, and I guess my most favorite memory as a child growing up was, and it ties in with Schreiber's railway heritage. All my family worked on the railway. My dad was a conductor. My uncle was an engineman, road foreman of engines. I had a cousin that was a mechanical supervisor, another cousin that was a carman. I was an operator and a train dispatcher, so we come from a railroad family. But when I was about 13 years old, my dad took me for my first train ride ever on a freight train. And if you've never done that before, especially if you're a young kid, that's probably one of the biggest thrills of your life. There's nothing better than riding along the north shore of Lake Superior on a train. And they had vans back in those days, cabooses. They don't have them now. They have sensor braking units. But back then, the caboose, it was actually a manned vehicle to transport the employees. And it was their office. It was their kitchen. It was their sleeping accommodations at night. When they would get into the end of the run, the yard engine would take their van off the train and put somebody else's van on, and that was your place to cook and eat and sleep. And then when it was time to come back, they would put the van on, and in the cupola there, the cupola, it was kind of like I guess similar to a bird's nest on a ship. You had a really good view of your train, and they would inspect the train, from both sides when it was going around curves, and they could check for dragging equipment, shifted loads, hot journal boxes. Back then they had plain bearings, not like now where they have roller bearings, and they used to be the journal boxes. They had oil and cotton in there to soak the bearings and keep them from overheating and reduce the friction on the truck frame. So if they saw smoke or anything, they knew that they had a problem. They would stop, inspect the car, and if it wasn't safe, they would set the car off. So it really was a big trip for me, and I never forget that. I had a lot of fun. Oh yeah, how could I forget birches? Yeah. That was birches. Even as a young child, I used to pedal up on my bike. Butch Moore used to own birches at the time, and I would ride on my bike and go there for a hamburger. And as I aged and through the years, it became a coffee spot, my favorite coffee spot later on. And Mrs. Birch, she made the best lemon meringue pie, and she had the best butter tarts and cinnamon buns. And her son Brian, he made the best hamburgers and French fries. And in the summertime, he would put a picnic table out in front of his restaurant, and we would all sit there and tell jokes and tell stories and watch the people getting off the bus, and that was my entertainment for the evening. As a child, we didn't have the modern gadgets and games that the kids of today have, but we did do a lot of outdoor stuff. In the summertime, we would go swimming. Mrs. Cox, Edna Cox, just lived across the street from me, and she had a big station wagon, and she would pack up all the kids in the neighborhood, the Spadonis and myself, and she'd take us all down to Rainbow Falls, and we would swim for the afternoon, and then we'd have hot dogs and hamburgers and everything later. So we did that. We went fishing. We built forts. Like I think every kid in town can probably relate to building a fort at one time or another. In the winter, we did tobogganing, and like where we went was next to the OPP office. It's all growing in now, but across from the graveyard, and that was quite a hill. You could really slide down there. At one time, I think we quit it because they were afraid we might go over the snowbank and onto the highway. the South End kids, they had Governor's Hill. That's where they went. But, you know, we did sliding, tobogganing, we did road hockey in front of our houses, and the traffic wasn't too busy on the streets back then. You could get away with it. And we did hockey too at the old arena, and we had a lot of fun. We did all that kind of stuff. And bike riding. I remember we used to, when Number 7, the Dominion, used to come in, they had a restaurant in the station at one time. Mr. and Mrs. McQuaig, Muggsy and Minnie, they run the restaurant. And, you know, you could, well, just before train time, when the Dominion come in after supper, they would open the restaurant. And we used to ride over on our bikes because they had the best comic books in town. Oh, lots of changes. I'll just give you a few that, because there's so many, I could go on forever. But TVs, for example, we started out with a black and white TV, and then they went to colored TV, and then they went to high definition TV, and then they went to three-dimensional 3D TV, and now they have smart TVs. And I have a funny story about before they went to colored TVs. When my dad was on his run at Thunder Bay, he bought one of these clear kind of a see-through tinted screen, and the top was blue for the sky and the bottom was green for grass, and then the middle part was kind of a flesh tone color to look like for faces. And he taped that onto his TV, and it actually give you a color effect, you know. I guess it was the first primitive color TV that we had, but we thought it was really great, you know. We really, as a kid, we really liked that. And then the phones, there's a big difference in phones. I remember our phone at first, they used to have telephone operators. And our number, I think, was 178. But you would pick up the phone, and the operator would ask you the number. You'd give them the number, and then they would make the connection for you. And then after that, the dials come in. We thought that was a big deal when you had a dial phone. And then after that, they sped it up and they come out with touch tone. And then we went to cordless. But before we went to cordless, I remember as a teenager, I bought this really long extension cord, about 50 feet long. And the idea was behind that you could take your phone and go into your bedroom if you were talking to a girlfriend or something, because it was very awkward before. It was right in the living room, right around your family, and everybody heard the conversation, and you know, you couldn't really talk the way you wanted to. And but now they have cordless cell phones, satellite phones, smartphones, so there was a big change there. Music was another big one. I remember when the VHS tapes come out. Well, first of all, I remember working at Albert Garrity's, and he had a gramophone. And it was those round, I don't know if you've ever seen them, but they were completely round like this, like a round tube. And that was your first records. And then that was a little bit before my time, but in my time we had the flat LP records. And then after that they went to VHS tapes, and then they went to cassettes, and then they went to CD tapes, and now they have MP3s that you can store thousands of songs on your smartphone, so that was another big change. Stoves, my grandma had a wood stove, and I don't know how she did it, but she always made perfect cakes, perfect pies, and you had no way of regulating the temperature. If you put too much wood in there, that was it, you know. But her cooking was really good. And you know, a wood stove was so nice in the winter, you know, it'd make you sleepy and tired. And then my parents, they had an electric stove, and then I have a microwave oven. So they've changed quite a lot too. And then I guess one of the other ones would be cars. Like my dad's car was standard, and they went to automatic, you know, where you didn't have to shift the gears. And then, you know, they come out with power steering and power brakes, where they they were mechanical before. And then when I was a teenager, they had hideaway headlights and hideaway windshield wipers. And now they have GPS. The radios are satellite, they're crystal clear, no static. They have dash mount cameras, they have backup cameras. In fact, the cars can even park themselves now. So there was lots of changes there. And I guess the other change would be prices. I remember my dad, when he bought his car in '68, it was $3,500. And I bought my first car in '72, and it was $4,400 plus tax, which was $225, $4,625. In '76, I bought another one, and it was $5,800. In '84, I bought another one, and it was $18,000. And the last one I bought new was my truck in '93, and it was $22,000. And I remember Ted Hill, one of my schoolmates, he had bought a truck in the late '60s, and everybody said he paid $2,500, and everybody said he paid too much. And like now, if you get a new vehicle for $25,000, you're doing pretty good. So those were some of the changes that I remember. Yes, I always liked fishing. In my young working days, I had a boat that I would leave at Rossport, and I loved to go out fishing. I loved to go out cruising, and to the lighthouse, and where the Gunilda sank, just not too far from where my dad and his uncle had their camp, and out to Battle Island, and that was fun. And I used to, one of the dispatchers I worked with, Mr. Langell, George Langell, he got me into winemaking, and he made the best wine. He made all different varieties: birch sap, rosehip, dandelion, blueberry. I can remember making some blueberry wine, and it was good, but I wanted to boost up the alcohol content, so I poured in a bottle of Alcool into the batch, and everybody got loaded on it. But I don't do any of that now, but I do make my own beer now, and I have fun with that, and I just do it for friends and family, and so those are my hobbies. Yes, I have a few I'd like to share with you. I remember from my parents hearing about this dog that saved a couple of lives in Schreiber. His name was Duke, and he got a medal for being a hero. And I believe there was a couple of boys drowning at, I think it was jackfish, I'm not totally positive. But the dog barked and everything and alerted the train crew, and got them over there, and the boys were saved. And I think one of the boys might have been Jack Moore. So that was a very good story. And well, dispatching, I had all kinds of stories, but this one kind of stands out. There's two of them that stand out, but this one is like, in this area we always had floods and washouts and forest fires, but this one time I was either chiefing or I was working the Nemigas White River sub, and my friend Gerard McGraw was working the Nipigon Heron Bay sub, and a call come in from Loon, from a train. Bob Krause was the engineer, and they had just hit an airplane, which stands out because you're not really expecting an airplane on the railroad tracks. And nobody was hurt. I believe it was either because of weather conditions, foggy or something, and the plane put down at Loon in the siding, and Bob was coming along on the main track and they clipped it. It was either that or he ran out of fuel or something, but I thought that was kind of a good story to share, because that's kind of a real odd circumstance, There were so many other railroad ones, but that was a really odd one. And the other one that I really liked, it's kind of a goofy one, but Bob Krause again was the engineer, and he had a meet at Boker, and he was in the siding, and his train went by, his meet went by, and I had give Bob the light to go, and I noticed after a few minutes he hadn't accepted the signal. Anyways, I had called up the train to see why they weren't moving, why they hadn't accepted the signal. And there was no answer, so waited a few minutes, and then I tried again, and they answered. They had just got back on the unit. Apparently, Mother Partridge with her brood was crossing the tracks, and the chicks got caught between the rails, and the crew didn't want to run them over. So it shows the compassionate side of the Schreiber people. It was kind of ironic. It was on a train 952 on a Saturday, which we always affectionately termed the Holy Day. That's because it had all the reefers with the Montreal meat, and you only had so many hours. It had to be in Montreal by Monday morning. But Bob made sure that the Partridge and her babies got across the track. I had a couple of just the other kind of a historical side. I do remember as a young child, you know where that pie shape is in Schreiber? The Figlemany boy has a house there now. That used to be Maple Leaf Motors, and they had a big, I don't know if they were welding or what happened, but I can remember as a young child they had a major fire there, and back in like my parents' house in those days they all had porches, and you could be in the front porch looking out down the street and saw the fire.